Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Kara Saker speaking. Well, we've all heard about UN Agenda 2030, and I don't think there's anyone who hasn't heard of it by now. So on the 19th of September last year, the UN's 77th General Assembly, there was a gathering of world leaders, of young influential change makers, along with those world leaders, and they gathered there in a 3-day conference to focus on UN Agenda 2030 beyond the pandemic and how they could advance that and get it across the finishing line. So the acceleration of UN Agenda 2030 and the 17 global goals using a narrow window of opportunity which hasn't been achieved yet. So yet another crisis will be on the way. There will be more talk about climate gloom and doom and another pandemic and a monkeypox or another disease that will be introduced to the world. So it's one crisis after another to achieve compliance, to control. So an extreme crisis is what they want to pull out of their hat so they can achieve this replacing the old normal of traditions, free market economy, the rural communities of farming, small businesses with transnational corporations, multi-stakeholder corporations. So UN Agenda 2030, the word sustainability is the world's largest ever advertising campaign, the solution to all ills. And it's gone beyond a nudge and a push to a mighty shove across the finishing line. And that's what they're on about right now. So the first open session to the UN Agenda 2030 was in 2013. So they introduced the plan for that, and it was very lengthy. There was hundreds of pages, and Bill Gates said, look, that's too long, too lengthy. It's more about the old normal, and we need to bring in a new normal, a multi-stakeholder corporation. So let's make it into smaller sound bites. Let's bring in the digital governance. That's what happened. So that was to reflect. He said that the long pages reflected the old way of thinking of business as usual. And that would not deliver a new economy of multi-stakeholder corporation. So it was necessary to shorten that documentation. So firstly, it was the shift to global economy at a global, regional, national level. The so-called old normal must disappear. The traditions, family traditions, Christianity, that's all got to disappear. Farming, small businesses, free market economy. How could they make that disappear globally? You can have a pandemic and you can plunder the economy globally, regional, and national to bring about a multi-stakeholder corporation where transnational corporations sit in the front seat of the driver's seat of governments worldwide. The government politicians sit in the back seat as the backseat passengers, and the populations around the world are the roadkill. And that's how it works. It's the public-private partnerships. So the shift to the global economy of the regional, national levels, the so-called old normal, out with the old normal and in with the new normal. And as the UN Secretary General said, We must never go back to the old normal. So it's these multi-stakeholder corporations, the UNWEF, that have made the problems, and they already had the solution to them, so that then, when the world is plundered of their economies and the social engineering has been completed, then what they do is they ride in like knights in shining armour on white steeds to solve the world's ill, to pick up the world's economy that is plundered, the plundered economy that they actually did in the first place. So that's how it works. So using the global propaganda machine that's been purchased by the UN, by UN nation states, leaders, as it has in New Zealand, the Generalist Fund. They work with the governments. And you're talking about banks, financial institutions, all being on the same platform as the government, all political. So populations complying with authoritarian leadership demands, re-engineering of society, hastens UN Agenda 2030. So multi-stakeholderism, the destruction of freedoms, is undemocratic, violates human rights, civil liberties, UN Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. You can read about that on the Auckland City Council 2020 to 2050 plan for Auckland. Probably other councils as well. They're calling for a new global governance, and it all relates to UN Agenda 2030, Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the WEF Global Redesign Initiative, a 600-page report from 2009, which calls for a new global governance, a new multi-stakeholder governance. It's all one and the same. And it's about lining the pockets of these wealthy corporations, self-serving wealthy corporations that enrich themselves, that they have an emphasis on shareholder profits, including CEO wealth. So focusing on education, where dumbing down of education, teaching the LGBTs instead of the ABCs, introducing child abuse, pornography into schools, drag queens into the education system, rather than teaching real education, the dumbing down of education. That's the target of UN Agenda 2030. We can't have extremely bright young individuals actually questioning UN Agenda 2030. They have to dumb them down. So we're talking about narratives that include focusing on multi-stakeholder partnerships, MSPs. You're talking about co-governance in New Zealand. It's all part of that. The elite iwi corporations that partner our government. And that's already happening. So we've got to stop that. It's all part of UN Agenda 2030. The mobilising, sharing of knowledge, expertise, technologies, financial resources to achieve that. In all UN member states, food and security, nutrition, scaling up nutrition, a movement called SUN, S-U-N, bringing together governments, UN agencies, donors, businesses, in a collective action to improve nutrition. It sounds good, but some members include UN governments, Bill Gates Foundation, that sits on the International Lead Group, which was launched in 2010 with 61 countries that signed up to Sun Issue N. It's a significant political group, huge group, and it has financial backing, and the financial backing started with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and now it is financially backed by the EU. So their theory and what they say is to end malnutrition requires multi-stakeholder platforms at national levels. It does not include small farming communities or small businesses. Sun International Leading Group, as I said, includes Bill Gates, NGOs, transnational corporations. They don't have a complaint mechanism, and they're accountable to no one. So they want this global shift and no accountability to anyone, an undemocratic system of multi-stakeholder corporate capitalism with democratic deficits, a top-down elitist leadership. Now, this is why there was a signing of the strategic memorandum partnership between the UN and WEF to gain more wealth and power to push UN Agenda 2030 across the finishing line. It was an enormous ambition where it gives much more wealth to 1% of the most wealthiest people in the world. So global multi-stakeholder digital coalition applications of digital technologies to implement this. So we're talking about data governance. May 2016, multi-stakeholder platforms to catalyze the collaboration of partnerships of UN Agenda 2030, UN Digital Roadmap. New Zealand government under Ardern, she used New Zealanders as guinea pigs for the World Economic Redesign Digital Initiative. In 2019, the UN reported it's off track with sustainability, hence the global partnership of the UNWEF that was established top-down to affect every UN nation in the world. That was the partnership memorandum. So 2016, Civil Society Reflection Group. They published an annual report on the assessment of UN Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and they called for a stronger action of world leaders to advance those goals using political, financial, legal instruments. Hence, crisis events, more and more crisis events for compliance to re-engineer society and their behaviours. More of their worshipping of Gaia, Mother Earth, destroying Christianity, character assassinating, persecuting Christianity. You will hear more and more about Mother Earth, Gaia, goddess of earth, not God the creator of heaven and earth, to boost immorality, target Christians, persecute and character assassinate them. Never ever before have Christians across the world been so persecuted as they have been over these last 3 years. So the pandemic, mandatory jabs, isolation, home detentions, track and trace, stay in your bubbles, broken relationships, fragmented family relationships, coercions, brainwashing, indoctrination, demands, controls, political policing, invasion of privacy, higher surveillance, monitoring, all of that, and wash your bloody hands. The plunging of New Zealand. Out with the old normal, out with the farming community, in with the TNCs, in with co-governance. This is the new normal. 2020 to 2030, the decade of actions. Agenda 2030, leave no one behind. Everyone, everywhere, at every age. IA 2030, advanced acceleration, new technologies for immunizations, big data, investments for big data, investments for vaccinations, immunizations. A scorecard for advancing SDGs was introduced in 2022. IA 2030, immunizations, vaccination, directly or indirectly embedded in 14 out of the 17 SDGs of UN Agenda 2030 to advance multi-stakeholder corporations worldwide. And that's what you have, people. One crisis after another, without the pandemic, without all these crisis events, this multi-stakeholder corporate global economy, regional, national, could never survive. It couldn't happen. So join the dots, see what's happened here. So flu season disappeared. What did you have? IA 2030. Increasing global surveillance, targeting people, persecuting people, calling them anti-vaxxers, shutting them down. UN Agenda 2030, multi-stakeholder corporations, co-governance, all in one. Wake up. We can't do anything about it globally, but nationally we can. We definitely can, but we must stand together in solitude, together, forget your own agendas and come together for the sake of this nation. We have ANZAC Day tomorrow. We're not going to let those war dead die in vain. They fought for our freedoms. What are we doing? Are we going to let that happen? Are we going to let our freedoms be destroyed? No. If you're not doing it for yourself, do it for your children and the next generation, their children. Wake up, New Zealand.